This is episode 54 of the Ownstream podcast, featuring Ross Lukeman.
Welcome to the Ownstream podcast. I'm Stephen Shelley.
And I'm Teresa Scoba.
And you may hear our third co-host this week, which is the cicadas in the trees outside our temporary house here in Coronado, Costa Rica, very close to Ojochal and Ovita and Dominical in the Costa Ballena region. Anyway, we're in this spectacular house, and so currently it is the time of day when the cicadas are humming. It's in the middle of the afternoon. So you may hear that in the background. Just know that it's nature announcing its presence on the show, which we're delighted to allow them in, for sure. This week's guest is Ross Lukeman, and this really came off of an interest we had in talking to somebody who could speak with us about all manner of alternative housing available to people. And his specialty right now is vans, and of course that's right in our wheelhouse. We love talking about vans and van conversions and building out vans for individuals, couples, and families. And so we do get into that. But Ross runs a business called Alternative Homes Today, and he's knowledgeable about all kinds of different forms of housing available: tiny houses, RVs, shipping containers, just what are those we talked about, like the earthships? That's right. Those are the most interesting to me. I love those. Strawbale homes, just a lot. He's very, very knowledgeable and informed about that. So that formed the basis of our conversation.
Yeah, he runs a site called Alternative Homes Today, which he started a handful of years ago out of his own interest in freedom, and freedom specifically from mortgage debt and from paying, from working a job to pay for your home. And how could you achieve freedom in that regard? And he's really studied this stuff. He's traveled. He tells us he's interviewed all of these people who lead these various housing movements. And he knows this stuff, but he's also very humble about it. He wants to be. He says that there's the right home for everybody, has the right home for them. And it's really about your own notions of freedom, what feels like freedom to you, what's your excitement, and he's very clear about that that it's hard work to build your own home, but there's so much. If you're excited about that, go for it, and there's so much freedom for you on the other side of that. But his excitement right now is vans, and he moved into a van a few years ago himself, and he learned how to build it out. And he's an architect by trade, and he's also just studied this stuff, and so he makes him somebody who has a passion for this and also the background. He now helps people to build their own vans and van conversions of all types, and for people who have different goals. People want a weekender vehicle, people who want to live in their van. And he has a great cargo van conversion course that we will include a link to in the notes. And it is an affiliate link, just so you know. So it doesn't change the price to you, but it does help gives a little support to us if you enroll in the course. So we want you to know that. That's how we first learned of Ross, actually, because when we were doing our van build earlier this year, we were looking at all kinds of van build videos, and I came across Ross's course and had used a number of his short writings on the topic, top 10s this, top 10 that, things he learned living in a van, things he learned building vans. So we never took the course, but it's a good course, and I think it is useful to a lot of people. The other thing we wanted to let you know.
Yeah, one big announcement from us is that by the time you're listening to this, probably, if you're like the kind of listeners that we hope you are, meaning you're waiting by your device or computer at the appointed hour to receive your weekly edition of the Ownstream podcast, which it's okay if you aren't, but if you are, then it is a little too soon to enjoy our YouTube channel. But the day after this episode goes live, which will be Thursday, March the 8th, so on Friday, March the 9th, 2018, our YouTube channel goes live featuring our, it's about 18 minutes, van build conversion tour video. We walk you through the whole build, our thinking behind all of our decisions, everything we included in the process, and it's all shot on site in Sedona. We found an amazing cul-de-sac which was right beneath a spectacular mesa, and we shot it there. And you can see the ins and outs of the van, all the corners of the van. We take you on a tour of this on the inside, the outside. It's Teresa and I. It's wonderful. There's even a little blooper at the end. Be sure to stay tuned for that. Don't miss the blooper. You get to hear Teresa's beautiful laugh, which is, for many of us, or some of us, really the most beautiful sound in the world. Well, and that is Sophia's laugh.
Yeah,
it's hard to compare them.
I don't want to compete with that.
Yeah, that's true. So you're number 2, Sophia's number 1. But anyway, that goes live on March the 9th. And just so you know, we've uploaded many of our most recent podcasts to the channel, so you can listen to those on YouTube as well if that's easier for you. There's a beautiful video there already of Amy Schriff's home, our last week's guest, her farm. We shot a little footage there. You can see the lush landscape that she enjoys on a daily basis. So yeah, that goes live March the 9th with the van build video, and we're really, really excited.
And we've been really wanting to launch this YouTube channel for a while, so it's really exciting for us. We have been wanting to get more into video to show you kind of the visuals of our own journey. And just so you know what we're doing with that, we have a channel trailer film that will also be live with the channel that kind of explains what the point of the channel is. But it's another access point for the podcast, but also we're planning to do a number of how-to videos related to things we've learned along our own journey and through the podcasts, as well as just some glimpses into, updates from us, video updates as we move along our own path.
Yeah, there'll be weekly updates from us, which is very exciting for me because when we're right in the middle of this journey, and maybe we're closer to the end than the beginning, who knows? We sort of look at each other every day like, what's going on here? Our big question right now, as you probably know, is like, what does home mean to us? Where does home exist? What kind of environment? What kind of setting? And the van was a big step in that direction. We learned a lot from that. I don't think it's the final picture, but it certainly has been the spectacular catalyst to move us forward. We're so grateful for that. So we'll be talking a lot about that right now as you tune in, and we'll be shooting video here from this beautiful house in Costa Rica, other locations across Costa Rica, and then who knows where from after that. We're very open. So you'll get to enjoy hearing us in real time describe our journey. And I think what we're doing right now is crucial. I think a lot of people are interested in this, or at least interested in this question for themselves, and can benefit from our journey thus far. So if that speaks to you, look forward to that for sure. But there'll be a lot of material on there, as Teresa said, so we hope you will subscribe. Go to ownstream.co/YouTube. That's ownstream.co/YouTube. You'll be jettisoned over to the YouTube site, to our channel page. You can subscribe, check it out, and hopefully bookmark that for future use. Okay, on to our interview this week. Ross Lukeman will be back afterwards to wrap up. Until then, please enjoy.
So Ross, welcome to the Ownstream podcast. We're so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we're really excited about you and your work, and you really you bring like a story to the Ownstream podcast we've been wanting to cover. I mentioned to you that we've covered van life a bit, and we have our own van life story, but we've also been wanting to cover just in more depth and kind of more focus the idea of alternative living environments and alternative paths and the kind of freedom you can create by creating a small dwelling or a mobile dwelling. And we've covered on the podcast, we've had a few tiny home guests, and we've done a little bit in van life, but we feel like you bring a kind of really broad perspective, that you've dedicated your life to this personally and professionally. So we're excited to dig into this with you.
Yeah, me too.
So, we'd love to get started. I know that reading a little bit about your bio and your childhood, that with your father being in, he was I think this is what you have in your bio. He's a financial advisor with a home building background, that you kind of got a sense of like what home ownership looked like from an early age, and had some early impressions of that. And I'm not sure, when you first it struck you that there was something off about this, in terms of home ownership and what it does actually to a person's freedom. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and when some of those notions first started to strike you.
Well, I guess just growing up in a major city and seeing kind of the traffic, people stuck in traffic, that stuck in my mind as a kid, and not wanting to be in that traffic, and kind of linking that to people paying mortgages and being kind of locked in, and also locked into one place, and kind of having this difficulty in, cashing out and moving to a different city. There's kind of a barrier to that. So there was that aspect. And then I ended up going to architecture school, and after I got out, I got laid off during the recession, and I was reading a book called Shelter by Lloyd Kahn. And there are all these home types, which people have heard of, Adobe, strawbale, rammed earth.
Yeah.
And there were like hundreds of typologies from all around the world that had kind of been lost or weren't really being shown. And I think we glossed over that stuff for about a day during my 5-year architecture program. And I just went down a rabbit hole with all that stuff because I saw all the people kind of locked into these mortgages. And then I was like, okay, here are all these, simple technologies that are inexpensive to build. I was like, why aren't we building these? So that was kind of the start to the journey. And from that, I created Alternative Homes Today, and I started interviewing people that had built those home typologies. And it just kind of took off from there. And then I frankly discovered vans a couple of years into that, writing a book about alternative homes. I interviewed my first van dweller in Manhattan, and I had a Skype call with him, and the whole world of vans kind of opened up to me.
He was the van dweller was living in Manhattan?
Yeah, he was.
Whoa.
He kind of lost his apartment during Hurricane Sandy.
Oh, wow.
And he had like a coffee shop and a wine bar there. He had one shop and he was opening a second one, and he was kind of invested in the neighborhood, but he couldn't afford rent anymore. After the hurricane, they raised the rent. There were a lot of building repairs, and they kind of changed the terms on him. And he kind of dug in his heels, and he's like, "This is my neighborhood. I'm not leaving." And so he ended up in a VW van parking there. I think it was like a southeast side of Manhattan.
Wow.
Yeah, or Lower East Side is what they call it.
Yeah. We used to live.
We
We
lived
lived
in
in
New York
Manhattan
for a long time.
Oh, really?
So that's
Jeez.
particularly striking, especially
amazed.
given your, how you said, what it's like living in a big city, and we're very familiar. We owned a home in New York and had a mortgage there, so like that was something for a long time that we, I basically worked a job to pay for that, and for a long time, and many people do that. Both renting and owning in New York is sort of like you're just living to pay your.
Yeah.
Talk about, Ross, your view on this whole mortgage phenomena. It is painted to us directly and indirectly as quote unquote the American dream, to own your own home and have a good job for X number of years, retire with a good pension, and live the good life. This is sort of the American dream, and it's crumbling all around us. But maybe you could talk from your perspective about the whole notion of a mortgage and why people do this, why they sink so much money into owning a home, and then maybe that can kind of open up as a window through which we can talk about all the other options that are out there.
Okay. Yeah. So the mortgages, they, what I see in places like New York and LA is you're not necessarily paying for the 2x4s and the sheetrock. You're trying to outcompete the other high earners in that area for that piece of dirt, that piece of land. And I think in places like Silicon Valley, where it might be, $4,000 a month for an apartment, if you're in those places, you have to be willing to compete at that level with those software engineers or whatever. So I think, I guess where people get mixed up is you may be in the wrong city, or you may just be paying the rent because you find yourself in a city with those high prices and you feel like you have to pay them. But you may not want to compete with software engineers in Silicon Valley. You might want to leave the Valley or leave Manhattan, or it's just kind of an economic reality that people find themselves in. And I think also the shifting sands of employment, where we no longer have the 30-year employers, where we can kind of do the mortgage, stay in one place, and kind of get the gold watch at the end of the career, that's almost completely gone. And so I think, in a way, the mortgages and that whole model may have fit generations in the past. And in a way, I think sometimes we have to be left holding the bag to realize that that era is past. I think that's happening a little bit with college right now. It's the parents sending their kids to college. They grew up with the thing of college as the golden ticket, and if you're guaranteed a job and you're guaranteed entry into the middle class, and it's kind of an insurance policy. I've heard it called an insurance policy against like poverty. You're hedging your bets to not be poor. But I think a lot of college. I think a lot of people are kind of left holding a bag where you get the debt, you get the degree, and you get out, and you don't get that job, or you get laid off. I got laid off 9 months into my employment, so during the recession, and that kind of just laid waste to all the illusions of like this guaranteed job. So I think a lot of what we're dealing with right now is things are changing, the economy's changing, we're going from an employer economy to more of a contractor economy. And I think the old models, going back to the mortgages, of kind of sitting in one place for 30 years and that being viable, I think it's in some places, like I said, in Silicon Valley, it's suffocating the amount that you have to pay and kind of dedicate your life to paying that. And then also, it may not fit the economic model of being mobile. And that's kind of one of the reasons I went into the van life, is to get my mobility back, because I was kind of in the city going to the job to pay for I had an apartment, but pay for the apartment. I had the apartment so I could go to the job, that whole circle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I really wanted the mobility, and I didn't know where the road would lead when I left that kind of standard life, but the mobility has really come in handy to be able to go where I need to go and kind of pursue new opportunities. That mobility has been critical.
Yeah, I love that, linking that with the transitions and the transformation that's happening in employment. That makes a lot of sense, because they do kind of go hand in hand. And I definitely grew up in a family, my dad grew up in the Great Depression, and, he really had to really, really make himself in terms of work. And then he went to school later in life. And that was just such a value for him, was for me, that he instilled in me, just a lot of the college and graduate school being the golden ticket, and then owning your home being this kind of, it's just this symbol of freedom and possibility, both of those things, and it's amazing how that's totally changing, how the reality of that is that you end up in most cases having a lot of debt that you're just shaping your whole life around to pay for. It's pretty incredible, but there's so much freedom emerging now on the planet in all of these areas. So tell us a little bit about, we definitely want to get into mobility and van life, and that's something we're obviously really excited about, as our listeners know. Tell us, as you started to create alternative homes today, talk a little bit about some of the structures that are just much cheaper to build, and ways that you've seen, some beautiful, comfortable, perfect sized homes for people that, may both kind of meet your needs and also employ, ecologically friendly strategies, or, ways you've seen people create freedom who might not be interested in mobility in a structure, but freedom in terms of freedom from financial entanglement with a mortgage and otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I would say, construction is difficult. And so I don't want to say that it's so much easier to not have a mortgage and to build it yourself, because oftentimes you do have to go through a lot of training and work to not have that mortgage. I would say a surefire, easier path is just to scale down. I mean, the more walls you have, the more square footage you have, you're going to pay for all that. You're going to pay for the land under it. And I think for me, with the van, it was just a gut feeling. And I had, frankly, with Alternative Homes Today, I had been looking for a house type to build for several years, maybe 4 years. and nothing quite fit until I got the van. I saw the van thing, and I just knew in my gut that that was a fit for me. So I think you do kind of get a gut feeling of, if you look at the tiny house and you think, yes, like that is the right size, I can put it in the right location to fit my life, and you get the feeling that it's gonna fit. Maybe it still ends up being a lot of work, or it still takes some dedication, but I think it's very personal.
Yeah.
And frankly, I have seen people build an adobe house or strawbale house, and there was one guy I talked to in Arizona. He went out and cast adobe for, I think, 25 weekends with friends. So in a way, instead of kind of signing the bank document, you're spreading out that labor. And oftentimes, he was a school teacher. He and his wife were both school teachers, and so they would teach all week, drive to the build site on the weekends, get together with friends, and cast adobe blocks and let them dry in the sun. So they spread that out over, I think, the whole house construction. They had a guest cottage and a house. It took maybe a year, 18 months to complete that. So I think if you don't choose the 30-year mortgage path, you have to pick the maybe 2 to 3 year planning and construction path.
Right.
If you do it yourself, which is not necessarily an easy path. I think up front, signing that mortgage document, you may get a feeling in the pit of your stomach, but that's easier. I think that's why it's kind of seductive. You just sign the paper and someone else does all the work. But I think your gut will tell you, what's going to fit your life as far as how much square footage you can handle, and what you want to do for your career, if you're retired or if you need to work. For me, frankly, the tiny houses, they were kind of stuck in one place, and they were outside the city. And I love being out in the middle of nowhere temporarily, but I don't want to be out there all the time. I like to be, in the cities where I have friends and, the stores and, woodworking supply houses, whatever. So I think each person has to kind of get the feeling in their gut and see what's going to fit their life or where they want their life to go. So, yeah.
And so for you, it was a van. What kind of van?
So this, my van is a Chevy Express Extended.
Uh-huh.
What is it? Tell us more about what that is. So we have a Sprinter van that's extended. Describe that for us and for the listeners.
Well, the Chevy is a low roof van, and you can put a fiberglass top on it so you can stand up. But it's just a regular, carpenter or electrician's van. It's got windows in the back doors and in the cab, and then it's all steel down the sides. And I really wanted to be able to blend in any city. I have to say now, I've successfully blended in most places. So I got the stealth factor, but it's a little bit scary looking. And I kind of wish I had some windows in the side, because I think it'd look a little friendlier. And the flip side of that is having a scary looking van. You can go in, scary neighborhoods in different cities and nobody messes with you. Mm-hmm. But you can go in a nice neighborhood and everybody's scared of you. So I think, I think the Sprinter, the high roof is good. If you're going to be full timing it, you need to be able to stand up and, throw some windows in the side. It's a little less stealthy, but it makes you a lot more approachable. But I will say I bought the van that fit my finances at the time. I financed it. And it was what I could afford. And I'm so glad that I pulled the trigger and just dove in. My next van will probably be a different model, probably a Sprinter. But I'm glad that I kind of dove in when I did.
And so you do a lot of boondocking. It sounds like you're parking on the side of the street in a city. Any kind of special stories from your boondocking experiences? Yeah. Boondocking, for those of you who may not know what that means, is really when you're not in a campsite, you're not in an RV site, you're kind of just in the middle of the world. And to the untrained eye, it looks like, hey, there's a van parked there overnight. Whereas in fact, somebody's inside that van sleeping and living in it.
Also referred to as stealth camping,
Stealth
which
camping,
Ross said he goes stealth.
Yeah. Well, I've had various experiences, and I will say, so what's funny is I came from Santa Barbara, California in November. I did a sprinter build out there for one of my students, and his van was illegal. It was too tall for the city ordinances, but mine being the low roof, I fit in. So this city, I parked out there on and off for about 6 months. We worked half-time on that build, and this city that has tried so hard, Santa Barbara, to kind of reduce the number of RVers, because the weather's beautiful, so you have a lot of people, a lot of vehicle dwellers there. So they have this ordinance, and I happen to fit under the height requirement, so I parked there for months. And now Naples, Florida, where I am now with visiting my client here, her condo complex does not allow work vehicles. It's kind of they're trying to keep the neighborhood nice or whatever. So you can be here during the day, but they want you gone at night. So you show up, you do your carpentry or electrical work, and then you leave at night. So it is kind of random based on the city. And I will say I've been able to sleep peacefully in most cities. I've mostly been in the western U.S., Seattle, Albuquerque, Phoenix. The only problems I've had is when I have bright lights on at night that are leaking out somewhere. I've had a few knocks. I've been out here about 18 months. So I would just say, like, once the sun goes down, don't have a bunch of bright lights, or have some lights that are on a dimmer and just turn them on where they're barely on, and make sure those windows are blacked out well. And you should be good. So I haven't had the scary, crazy people experiences that everybody thought I would when I came out here.
Yeah. Well, in looking back, you know, to our knowledge, it's really been in the last. I mean, there's always been an alternative dwelling movement, an alternative home movement. People, you know, going back 40, 50 years even, kind of choosing to live differently, and maybe the taproot of all this could have been the 1960s. But really, it seems to us that it's really experienced a big boom in the last decade, 15 years. And maybe you could talk about that movement and what has led to so many different forms of homes appearing. Maybe the most interesting to many people is the tiny home, but there's all kinds. There's these container homes. There are these shipping container homes that I think are beautiful. We just passed one down here in Costa Rica.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like 5 of them on different angles, one on top of the other. It was amazing. And the guy has it built behind a huge fence. You can barely see it, which is too bad. But anyway, like maybe let's get into the history of this and what has led. What has been the catalyst, or why is it that now there are suddenly so many of these? We even have a magazine about it, Dwell Magazine. Talk about that for just a little while. Give us a sense of where this is coming from.
Well, I think YouTube does have a lot to do with it, in the fact that these kind of obscure building types are featured now on a regular basis and can go and be viewed anywhere in the world. And there are publishers like Kirsten Dirksen, I believe her name is, and then Exploring Alternatives. They publish a lot of alternative home types. It just people seeing it. Frankly, YouTube was a big influence on me as far as watching the other van dwellers, and now I produce YouTube videos about being in the van, and that influences other people. So I think it's kind of an exponential effect in that regard. And then in the mobile space in general, I think it's the ability to work, be a mobile workforce and do work over the internet, to be connected to your friends and family through the cell network, and also do work over the cell network. And solar power has definitely made the vans and RVs, you know, more off-grid and able to go anywhere. But yeah, as far as the the different home typologies, going back to alternative homes in general, I think it is just the spreading of ideas and seeing that, oh, because before you would just see, the tract homes in the neighborhood in whatever city you were in, and you thought that was the option. And now you're able to see this, strange adobe home in the Arizona desert on YouTube, and you see that's a possibility. And so I guess the home builders or that way of doing things don't have a monopoly on our attention anymore.
It's interesting thinking about the contrast from architecture school, and like just that you did, that you got like 5 minutes on that, and that like you said, like there's so much out there when you Google, alternative home or van life or whatever. Like there's just like a wealth of information out there, which I guess is like kind of what happened to you when you got interested in this. Huh? You just kind of started digging, and there was like so much information out there, and more and more now from when you started.
Yeah. I think I had a proclivity towards this stuff as well because I grew up in the garage building things. And when I got out of architecture school, I realized that, not to denigrate architects, but they don't build a lot. They go and inspect the build site. And so I wanted to get back to actually building with my hands and making things. So I took home building workshops. I did a cob workshop in Oregon at Cobb Cottage Company. So I think that swayed me to kind of dive into this. And also knowing if you're somebody that can build, you don't want to hire somebody to build your house. I thought I love to build. I don't want a mortgage. I should build my house. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole, looking for what I could build. So, yeah.
And thinking about financial freedom, maybe you can give us a sense for listeners who might not know like what a strawbale home is, or an adobe home, or like a cob home, like what those are, and also like what does it cost to build one? I'm sure it varies depending on the size and all that, but just to maybe you could give a sense of that compared to kind of a more traditional path.
Well, if you have a builder build those, they're not necessarily cheaper than a stud frame home. The cost savings is, I would say, about 50% of your cost is labor. So if you do it yourself, that's 50% of your build cost. And then with the mortgage path, you pay for the labor, you pay for the materials, and then you roll that into a bank loan where you pay for a lot of interest. So if you do it yourself, you're eliminating all that loan interest, and you're eliminating a lot of the labor costs. So you're left with just the materials. So there are kind of green builders that build strawbale homes for millionaires, and they're just as expensive or more than a stud frame house. So I think it's just looking at, if you don't want to pay interest, figure out a way not to pay interest, or if you don't want to pay for all the labor, figure out a way to not pay for the labor. So they're not necessarily a magic bullet. I think what they are good at is not introducing a lot of chemicals. So like cob and adobe in particular, they're clay based, so they'll absorb toxins out of the air and out of the water, and so you're not introducing all these strange chemicals that you can't pronounce into your airspace. So you have better indoor air quality with those home types.
And like you said before, it's kind of like a simultaneous move towards simplicity and downsizing and minimalism that may be more of the cost savings, that you're creating a smaller living space with a lot of these homes often, or that's often kind of like what the cost savings might come from, more than maybe like what the home is made out of.
Yeah, definitely size, and kind of like I mentioned with this condo complex here in Naples, Florida, which is kind of like a ritzy town. They didn't want the work van, so a lot of times these same towns, they don't want super small homes. One, because their tax base goes down. They want the larger homes so they can get the tax revenue, which may be necessary to run the city or whatever. So they'll actually outlaw the smaller homes, and that's what Jay Schaefer discovered, the kind of the founder of the tiny house movement. was that if he put it on a trailer, all of a sudden it was an RV, and he got around all of those size requirements. So I think due to people trying to protect their home values, they don't want a dumpy trailer next to their mansion or whatever. We've kind of gotten ourselves locked into larger and larger homes as far as single family dwellings are concerned. Obviously you can get a small apartment if you want, but the size requirements have kind of gotten out of control, where we're way larger than we really need, and there are all these mechanisms to protect home values, and we're building these monsters. And so I think that kind of sidestepping that in a van or a tiny house on a trailer, or moving to a city that allows smaller houses, I think is necessary, because it's gotten a little bit out of hand with the house sizes.
And so, based on all you've been exposed to, Ross, what are some of the most exciting types of alternative homes that you found? Which ones are the most maybe interesting to you, other than say a van? Because I know that's not, because we know that's number one.
Say van.
And then we'll dive into the vans.
Okay. Well, let's see. I think straw bale's pretty neat, because it's straw bales are natural insulators. And that is, Teresa, to answer your earlier question, so straw bale is the straw that's left over, I believe, when you remove like the wheat. That's like the chaff that's it's not biodegradable, and that's what's left over once they remove kind of the wheat from the field. So they tie that into bales, and it's a great insulator. And the guy I mentioned earlier in Arizona, he built an adobe guest cottage in a straw bale main house. And just for anybody who is interested, he said the straw bale way outperforms the adobe as far as insulation and interior comfort levels. So I would say that's a pretty cool one. The shipping container homes are really neat. One drawback is you are restricted to like an 8-foot by 40-foot footprint. So you have to kind of design within those constraints, which could, force you to come up with some pretty creative ideas. But I think those are neat I've actually wanted one for a cabin that I'm not at all the time, because you can close the doors on the end of that shipping container and put a really good padlock on it, and it's secure until the next time you come back. Right. So that's kind of a neat use for those. And also kind of like your guy that you saw in Costa Rica there, you can stack them, and they're kind of self-contained structures. So you can weld them together and make multi-tier structures. So I would say those are pretty cool. There's also geodesic domes, which there's a company out of Minnesota that I interviewed. I interviewed their founder, Dennis Johnson. Those are really neat, and they're super insulated, up to like 1 foot thick of insulation. And you can create these massive kind of indoor spaces. The only kind of drawback is they have non-standard materials. Basically, their panels are all triangles. Right. So you have a little bit of material waste, and those can be kind of expensive. That may be more of your millionaire greenhouse, or green building for millionaires. But ironically, those came in the 60s with kind of the hippie movement, was where geodesic domes kind of got their start.
Yeah, wasn't that Buckminster Fuller? Didn't he create the first one? Yeah.
And I think
go ahead.
The guy in Minnesota that built them today, I think he may have gone to a lecture by Buckminster Fuller. Really? And kind of gotten his start. He started out as kind of like the hippie builder, built one for himself, and then it just kind of mushroomed into a big business.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Buckminster Fuller was like just this brilliant mind in the kind of early part of the 20th century.
I think didn't he come up with the geodesic dome?
Yeah, he did. My understanding is he did. I know about him through a completely different channel. He showed up at Black Mountain College in the 1960s, early 60s, and a choreographer I worked with a number of years ago was there at the same time and was exposed to Buckminster Fuller and really fell in love with him and just how genius he was. And they would build geodesic domes right there on the campus of Black Mountain College. This is back in the early 60s. Yeah. What is an earthship? Tell us about those. Those are interesting. I mean, if you're a fan of Tolkien novels, for example, they're very interesting.
Yeah.
Which I am.
I actually went, the Earthship kind of headquarters is outside Taos, New Mexico, and I went by there and I saw the whole field of Earthships.
Wow.
Cool.
And they started out using kind of landfill materials, bottles and cans and tires, used tires, and they were able to create these. They're bermed, so they have interior temperature control as far as like they're not exposed to the cold winds and stuff like that, so you don't lose as much heat. So they kind of bury the back of the house, and then the front of the house will face south, or depending on the hemisphere you're in. In the U.S., they would face south, so you get that solar collection, so it'll heat up the interior during the winter. They're pretty much a self-contained little ship for Earth. They produce their own water. They filter their wastewater. They, they'll collect rainwater off the roof, and it'll water the plants inside, so you can grow tomatoes or whatever. And the south side of the house being all glass, you could have kind of a little greenhouse there before you get into the main space. They often have solar electricity, and then they'll have solar thermal, which is heats the water. And so it's really just. And those again, they're kind of almost collector's items. They're all over the world now, and they can be priced in the millions as well. But it's just kind of thinking critically about, okay, we're throwing away all this waste, all these old tires. Can we use this as a structural column? And then, instead of relying on the power grid, can we design the house to be so efficient that it doesn't need lots of air conditioning, it doesn't need lots of heating, kind of use what's on site, use the existing solar that's coming in from the sun to heat the house instead of using, propane. So they're hyper efficient. They're just kind of consciously designed. There's a lot of design thinking that goes into them.
And of those, which of those are if you're a real DIY person, like you want to do it yourself, you want to build your own home, and which of those is perhaps the easiest, the most doable for a DIY mind?
Well, let's see. I frankly haven't built all the types, so I can't say from personal experience. I would say, I'm going to kind of turn your question around a little bit. I would say build whatever you're the most excited about, because construction is hard and you got to have that vision, and it's like I teach people how to build vans, and when I get a student that's really excited about the project, I'm like, perfect, like let's get started, because you need that fuel, you need that excitement. And then I would just say, whatever home type you choose, build a little shed out in the backyard first to test your methods. Go to a workshop with a pro, so you can get some hands-on training. Go home and build a little garden shed. If it's an earthship, build it with tires and by the way, I should mention on the earthships, the tires are not exposed. They're inside the structure of the wall, but you plaster over that, so it looks like an adobe home. Or even the strawbale homes, the walls are plastered over. So on the outside, they look the same. The walls are just 2 feet thick. But I wanted to clarify. I don't want people thinking they're gonna sit in their living room and stare at tires.
No, it's such a great answer for us because we talk on the podcast all the time about following what really excites you. So I don't know if you knew that, but that was actually like such an awesome thing to say.
Good answer.
And we totally believe in that because, like you're saying, there's a lot of work involved for real, right? So you got to follow through and to enjoy the process and to enjoy what comes out of it. You got to kind of really go with what you're excited about.
Yeah.
So let's talk about van life and van conversion. So
Okay.
you discovered van life like a couple of years into doing alternative homes today, and you you teach people how to build vans now, which is actually how I first learned of you, because I was on your mailing list for a long time when we were figuring out what we were going to do with our van, and we ended up having to do it like really fast, and we hired a tiny home builder who lived next door to us to kind of like do it really fast with us. But
Cool.
but like, since this is obviously what you became most excited about yourself, did you tell us a little bit about that journey for yourself? So when you got excited about this and knew you wanted to get a van, what did you do next? And did you teach yourself how to build vans? Like, how did you acquire all this knowledge?
Well, so one of the jobs that I didn't mention between being laid off as an architect and running my own business is I spent about 5 years wiring electrical systems for U.S. embassies. And I actually got that job. I was a Home Depot cashier between jobs, and I would talk to all the people coming through my line trying to kind of network. And a guy came through my line, and I said, let me demagnetize these tools because in case you bring them back. And he said, oh, they won't be coming back. They'll be on a plane tonight. And I said, well, where are they going? And he said, well, these are going to Bogota, Colombia. These are going to Shanghai, and these are going to Yemen.
Wow.
And he had all these orders. And this was just my local Home Depot in my town. And so I said, what do you do? And he needed some CAD work. So long story short, I got that job, and they would run out of technicians, and they would send me overseas. I was their office CAD guy. So I drew electrical diagrams, which is part of my job today. But what was critical was getting those installations in. I went to about 6 embassies and consulates, or not about, but exactly 6. A couple in South America, one in Indonesia, one in Lithuania, and one in Turkey. And so that boosted my electrical knowledge, which was kind of missing I didn't get that in architecture school. So I guess to answer your question about the van, I kind of combined my childhood of woodworking with my design background with my electrical background. And at that time, I actually got the idea from a friend of mine. We were on a mastermind call, and she mentioned that she was going to do a photography course because she's a kind of a pro photographer. And it just hit me because I was like, I'm doing this van. And so I did kind of, at that time, I took the best of my knowledge, and I hired a friend of mine who films weddings, and we filmed the conversion of my van. And so I kind of brought my electrical and design backgrounds into it. And now at this point, I've got about 125 students, and some of them have hired me, and I was in California, I was in Iowa, and now I'm in Florida. So I'm starting to get hit with different requests from different students, and I'm having to so my knowledge is advancing, I guess is what I'm trying to say, as I'm kind of building different vans based on people's different needs.
That's cool. And we watched a ton of van conversion videos when we were first planning ours, and it's one of the things we love about van life, including, in addition to the mobility factor, which was also big in our excitement, is that you really can customize based on what's important to you.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your first, the van you built for yourself. What kind of design did you do? How long did it take you? And maybe if you're, maybe how much it costs too. And then maybe we can get into some of the work you've done with others.
Okay. Well, I'll just throw out cost. By the time I financed it, it was 9 months old, and it was just a basic rental van. So it was about $25,000. Financed it for 6 years. Payments are $366 a month. Insurance, full coverage insurance is about $90. So I pay about $450 a month, kind of rent, quote unquote. Yep. So that's the cost. There's about $5,000 in parts. As far as the time, and most of that, about $2,000 of that was the electrical. So electrical is your biggest cost, as you guys I'm sure know.
Yep.
Yeah. And then let's see, as far as the timeline, I always tell people I doing that course and building my van and filming, because we would film and edit and build a lot of stuff off camera. It took about 18 months. So that was way off from what it actually takes to build a van. I would say 2 to 3 months would be a good timeline for somebody. Now, if you're working all week and working on the weekends, maybe 6 to 8 months. I would just say buy the van, park it in your driveway, and work on it when you can. I would say something, if you get the inkling that this is something you want to do, don't wait till all the stars align. Go ahead and get the van so it's there and you can kind of start tinkering with it and getting ideas and ordering parts and stuff like that. I don't know. You had a third question. I don't know if I answered it.
What was your van like? Like what design did you do? Because some people, you can get really elaborate, right? Like with like bathrooms and showers, or get really elaborate with your electrical, or you can kind of keep it really simple. Like people do both. I was just curious what choices you made in the beginning.
Well, so mine is completely off grid, so there's no dedicated plug-in. I have kind of a giant solar panel so that I could run my iMac computer inside the van for several hours a day. And also the big solar panel allows you to go to kind of rainier climates, like maybe Seattle in the winter, and still have some power. So I kind of oversized the solar, 200 amp hours of batteries. So it was kind of an average size battery bank. And then as far as just the overall design, I wanted a dedicated bed that I didn't have to fold up every day. I wanted something I could kind of go into the back and just dive into bed without doing anything. So that was important. And also because it was full time, I wanted the bed to be really comfortable. So I actually have a spring mattress from IKEA back there. And then I put a lot of money. This goes back to what, Teresa, what you said about priorities. My paneling is like $10 for a 4x8 sheet, so it was very inexpensive. But then I put about $2,000 into having my iMac computer there. I put a solid state hard drive in it, so it could take the vibrations of the road. That was about $900 for that hard drive, and I put it in an iMac that was a few years old. So it's kind of whatever's important to you. The water system has a hand pump faucet on it, which I would frankly probably just put in an electric pump now, so you can just open the faucet and the water runs. You might use up a little more water that way, but it's nice sometimes to allow the water to run without having to pump it constantly. And then let's see. Yeah, I put a lot of money into some things and then kind of went inexpensive on other things. I will say on the showers and bathrooms, I think, because people always ask me, I don't have those. I have an emergency camping toilet that, this is kind of too much information, but I use about once a month when I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. But I avoid that at all costs, because with the showers and the toilets and everything, with the shower, you have to get all your water, and then you have to collect it underneath the vehicle and then dump all that water. So you're really doing a lot of work for a shower, where you could just go to a gym or campground and just get a shower and not have to do all this extra work. Now, maybe you have one in there that you use once a month, and it's important that when you're out in the middle of nowhere. There are also are the showers that you can kind of grab the shower off the end of the van and kind of take an outdoor shower.
Yeah, those are kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But I would say, going back to the showers, if people want to do those, the plumbing is doable, but it adds a lot of complexity.
Yeah, we flirted with the idea of kind of a plumbing system, a shower/toilet system, but we kind of decided, along the lines of what you're describing, that we were going to be in RV parks and campgrounds for the most part. We weren't going to do a lot of boondocking with the baby. So we would have access to facilities, and we got by pretty well with that.
We had the emergency.
We did have the
also.
emergency. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's it.
It does come in handy. It does come in handy.
Yeah, it does. But when you're working with somebody, what are some typical goals or a range of goals that people are looking to achieve in, transforming their lives into living in a mobile dwelling like a van? What are they hoping to achieve? What have you seen them achieve?
Well, I will say it's pretty neat that I've discovered, because I kind of came into this from the construction side, like let's help people do the construction. But what's really cool is to learn each student's story, because there always is some type of life transformation. And so let's see. One guy, he had gotten divorced, and he works 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off in Alaska. And he would just go home to his house in Alaska, which he was there by himself. I'm making this sounds really sad, but anyway, he wanted to use his sell his house and actually use, when he had his 3 weeks off, he wanted to travel around the continental U.S. and see things and really use that time instead of sitting at home. So that was his story. One lady that I actually built for in Iowa, her son was in another state going to grad school, and she thought he might move, even further away, maybe to California, and she wanted to have the mobility to go and visit him and visit, I don't think he had any kids yet, but just to have access and be able to kind of pick up and go. She wasn't necessarily tied to that city. And I will say, a lot of people that want to leave a city, they can build a van over 6 to 8 months while they still have their job and, still put up with whatever they have to put up with, and they're kind of building that van, preparing to kind of make a break for it. Mm-hmm. So I've had some students that just want to get out. I had a couple that they were online students. They built a van so they could go and see their son in another state and kind of see the national parks along the way. Let's see. I'll say, I'll leave it at that, but I will say there's a lot of transformation. People looking for a life change, either career-wise, or they're retired and maybe they've been sitting in the same place for 30 years, and they don't want a big Class A RV,
right?
Yeah.
Any kind of particular requests or challenges that you've had to deal with from somebody that was different or unique or interesting?
Yeah. So there is a lady, a really cool lady, one of my students out of Chicago. She has a long wheelbase ProMaster, the 159 wheelbase ProMaster, and she asked me if we could fit a bathtub on the tail of her van and have her bed, and she has a keyboard that's about 5 feet long. She's a musician, and she owned a live music venue in Chicago that she recently sold. And so I did some AutoCAD, and I sent it off to a 3D designer, and we came up with this design where she has this bathtub at the end of her van, and her twin bed kind of folds up in the Murphy bed style, and then her keyboard folds up, and she's got this bathtub with kind of a little platform where she could put her wine glass or whatever.
Wow.
So, I told her, I said, I don't know logistically, if you'll want to build this, because you're going to need some big water tanks under there to feed that bathtub. But I said, well, we'll give it a shot and see what happens. So I sent her that design probably 2 weeks ago, and she was really happy with it. And I think she's got some builders in her family, like welders and craftspeople. So I think she's got the right help to pull it off. So we'll see what happens.
Tell us a little bit more about your course, because in getting your emails, I'm just like, oh my gosh, you have a ton of information that you've gathered and put together, and the modules, and it just seems like really comprehensive. Like, maybe tell us, if you can, just walk us through a little bit what your course is like from beginning to end. Like, what process are you guiding people through? And this is something you run generally online, right? But you, I guess, are being hired by people to come actually do some conversions as well.
Yeah. So the course is online. I have been asked for live events, which I may have my first one this year. I was thinking about that earlier today. But the course as of now is online, and it takes you from an empty shell all the way through a finished van, which in itself is helpful, I've heard from the students, because a lot of times you don't know what to do next or what order to do things in. So it takes you step by step through that. And it's, like I said, I hired wedding videographers to film it with their fancy cameras. So, we did a good job of kind of zooming in on those details to show like what exactly that plumbing fitting looks like. So I'm pretty detail oriented, so I really wanted to not glaze over anything. So there are the videos, and then at the end of each module, there are about 15 modules. There's a parts list of what was used in that module, and then suggestions for alternates if you want to use an upgraded inverter or something, that'll be listed in that parts list. And then there's a companion guide that is an illustrated version of the video. So cool. If you watch the video and you kind of get the gist, like, okay, here's what we're doing, and then you want something to take outside that says step 1, step 2, step 3 that kind of mimics what was in the video, that's the companion guide. So there are 15 of those, 15 parts lists, and then 15 video modules. And each video module might have 3 to 11 or 12 actual videos, usually like 3 to 5 minute videos. So it's a little over 6 hours of total video. Cool. And it also tracks your progress. So when you watch a video, it'll put a little check mark so you know that you've watched that video. It kind of just breaks down a lot of information. It organizes it. And then, like I said, the students are always throwing stuff at me. And so they'll say, what about this? What about that? And then I'll kind of work with them to do kind of out of the box type things. And I should add also, I've done power systems for the last couple of years for students. And I recently, in the latest edition of the course, I compiled all those power systems so that if you want shore power or lithium batteries or something specific to you, or you want a giant system that's going to run an air conditioner, those are all listed, and you can pick a specific power system that meets your needs, and that'll have like its own set of installation diagrams that are specific to that system. It'll have its own parts list that's specific to that system. And I've also started adding some 3D designs inside the course so people can see different furniture and different layouts. That's kind of the course.
I'd love to hear you talk about how you now, so you this course kind of flows through your website, and we'll obviously link to the website and the course in our show notes, but you're out in a van, you're traveling, you're moving around. I assume you don't have Wi-Fi in the van. So how do you talk about some of the logistics of running an online business from a mobile dwelling?
Well, I would say if you put in the investment to have a little office, a comfortable office with a comfortable chair and maybe a large screen so you're not straining, it is possible to be in the van. I will say my limitation now that I'm building, because I run my online business and am pretty much booked up on builds. I'm in Florida right now, came from California, got to go back to Iowa. So I'm not always in ideal weather. When I first came out here, I was a snowbird, and I was like, oh, this snowbird thing is a great idea. And so I traveled with the weather, and so it was great. But then people started calling me and saying, can you show up here? And I've got to go whichever season. And don't get me wrong, I love building, and it's a great opportunity, so I'm excited to go. But Santa Barbara was actually pretty good in California. It could occasionally get too hot, but then when I went to Iowa, it was got down to in the teens, 15 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes at night. And my solution in those situations is to rent a co-working office. And I've done that in about 5 cities. And frankly, there's another reason, and I mentioned this in some of my videos that I put out, is you get to a new city and you don't know anybody. So the co-working offices give me kind of a built-in, I have people around that I can talk to, and kind of gives me some social aspect to it. But yeah, like when I was in California, I remember it being really hot, and I went down to Burbank, and it was in the 90s or high 80s and low 90s, and I had to get out of the van, and so that co-working office was kind of my air-conditioned little haven that I would go to. So I would say if you want to fight the weather, which a lot of my students do, they have the heaters so they can be in, sub-freezing temperatures, and the air conditioners so they can be in the heat, build that in. And I will say, the more you kind of have to look at it, am I going to do this full time? If I'm going to do it full time, do I want to be able to go anywhere in any season? That's going to add cost and complexity to the van, versus kind of building a quick van that you can go out on weekends with. Might be a much simpler build. It just depends on what you're going to be up against out there, and how much latitude you want to have as far as where you can go at what time.
And does the course run all the time, or is it something people join every few months or every 6 months or something like that?
Well, currently it opens every few months. It opens a few times a year. I call it a launch. So it takes a lot of effort to kind of put it all together and send out all the emails. So I usually do it when I have like a week or two of free time. I ran a launch last month in January, and it's kind of consumes you for a week and a half.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a number of launches, and I've had an online business for a dozen years or so, and I can remember when, launches were really simple, and now they are so detailed, so specific, so intricate. If you're really into launches, Jeff Walker's got a great course on it, Product Launch Formula, which is incredible.
I just bought that this morning.
Yeah.
Wow.
I did that. I worked through that a few years ago for another business, and it's incredible. It is incredible.
Really?
All of
That's
it.
good to hear.
It's so good. It's so good. But and so now when I'm on the receiving end of a launch, I'm kind of walking through the steps, because I know this is the Jeff Walker launch, so we got this happening, and then this is going to happen, and then this is coming next. But it's really, really effective. But no, it's just incredible to me. Like, if you're listening to this and you're kind of interested in online business, there's a whole world of ways to market and promote. And what Ross is talking about is, some people have courses that are evergreen, meaning they're live all the time, and then there's another design where you can release them maybe quarterly or twice a year or whatever it may be. It sounds like you've embraced that model, and boy, I think Product Launch Formula will fit right in with what you're doing. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited. It does look like a lot of information, so I'm wanting to re-film my launch series this summer. So I figured about 4 months to go through the course, so I'll be ready. By the summer.
Smart.
I will say, I just like to throw in on the online businesses. I worked during the job where I did the U.S. embassies. I would come home at night when I was at the office and not deployed or whatever. And I would work a lot of nights and weekends, and I built up and I figured out what I was doing about 5 years before I ever quit that job. So I would say to people, if they want to have an online business and they want to maybe do the van thing, start that business when your life is stable, and don't start it once you move into the van. Just kind of plant that seed and just let it grow slowly, and read the books and invest in the programs. Use your paychecks to buy the books and programs and kind of figure out what you're doing, so that you're not trying to squeeze cash out of a business that hasn't quite matured yet.
Yeah, it's a really good approach. I was thinking about your excitement for this, and how, like, we talk a lot about calling on the podcast too, just how, something you're called to do both personally and as a service to others. And it really feels like you had all these like beautiful kind of experiences in your life and expertise that led you to be able to give this gift to others. I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about like, some of the benefits to this life for you, like what's it like now, and maybe some of the biggest things you learned, both from your own van life and also working with others.
Well, let's see. What I've learned, I guess I would take I told somebody the other day that I jumped off a cliff a couple of years ago, and that's kind of how I see what I did, making a break for it out of corporate America. And so it kind of worked out. Like I have customers and I'm helping a lot of people. So it kind of worked out. And I use that model now. I would say if you have a chance to jump, that first jump is just going to lead to more opportunities to jump in other areas of your life. And if you don't take that first jump, it kind of prevents all the sequential jumps after that. As far as taking a risk and going for something that seems a little unrealistic, it's important that you take that first risk and make that first jump. So I've learned that. I have learned what it takes to really do a business. I think that the van life, maybe on Instagram, and I don't want, everybody's got a different situation. Maybe people have lots of savings and they can take a year off or whatever. I've had to work really hard. It was about 8 months before I visited my first national park out here. I've just been helping people. I've been helping people build their vans, doing AutoCAD. Occasionally I'll do a YouTube video, but it's been nonstop. And I think that people should be ready for that. And definitely the weeks off in the national parks are, they are fantastic, and you need to take them because you need that to clear your head, and you need that time away. But I would say you've got to hit the ground running and really serve people, and be willing to take your customers' problems and make them your own, and do research or whatever, and try to deliver, even if sometimes maybe you're not paid as much as you think to do all that work. Just really push to provide a great service and to have those happy customers. And it takes more work than, it's not, it takes a lot of work, and it may subside. Obviously you can automate some systems, and you can eventually get people to help you run the business and stuff like that. But you've got to kind of take that long view and be willing to put in that work and stand behind your work and all that stuff. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were talking, Ross, that like entrepreneurship, it's that way for any entrepreneur who kind of goes for it and wants to really be their own boss, who wants to stop trading time for money, wants to kind of build something that can eventually free their time more and more. But really, it's really kind of about what you talked about there, a little bit between the lines about serving others and doing so in a way that brings meaning. And you had talked earlier about corporate America. I had a corporate job, and I've worked I've worked harder in entrepreneurship, no doubt, than I did in a corporate job. But the return on that investment is so different. Whereas in a corporate job, and there's nothing wrong with the corporate job, it's just that many people don't prefer it. I didn't prefer it. And so, there are other options. But all I was really doing was trading time for money. And eventually it just was, I couldn't bear the idea of doing that anymore. And now running Ownstream and other businesses that I've run online, it's more work. But the return is so much greater, and the feeling of meaning and contribution is so profound. That's really where it's at. Like, it sounds like I would imagine if I hired you to do my van lead conversion. You would be exceptional at it because your attitude is so good about it, like serving others, really making. And you're building homes basically. You're working right into one of the most intimate parts of a person's life, and so having that grasp of it, really serving them and putting yourself in their shoes, I bet makes you really, really good at that.
Yeah, I enjoy building, and I kind of enjoy customer service, kind of old school customer service. And I'm not perfect, but I try to improve and give that good experience, and make sure I build stuff that's not going to fall apart, or teach students how to build stuff that's not going to fall apart. But yeah, I think with the whole going back to corporate America, it's comfortable. It's comfortable, and it's very scary to leave. So you kind of have to. I realized this recently. I think my fears of what might happen is a bigger motivator for me than my desire to achieve something. And I really feared being locked into corporate America with a family and a mortgage and like not being able to quit. That was a very scary prospect to me. And I saw men, that I could see where I was headed, my supervisor, just locked in. And so I think, like you said, building is a joy to me. And so I feel really lucky to be building. And there was a point in my late 20s where I was like, Ross, you don't build anything anymore. Like, what are you doing? I was like, you're a builder. Like, it was just part of my DNA from being a little kid. And I realized that I wasn't doing any of that. And so it's really awesome to be able to buy woodworking tools and buy, all these special tools and build again. So I am thankful for that. And I would say, as far as comfort and the corporate job, I think there was a point when I realized that comfort wasn't it. And that you see a lot of society, they want the most comfortable couch. They want the most entertaining TV show to come home and watch. They want everything cushy. And I realized that often leads to unhappiness. And that a lot of times what makes you feel great is, working on a client's project for long hours and really pushing to achieve something great. And a lot of times it's not comfortable. Sometimes you're facing fears, or you're just putting out a lot of physical exertion, working long hours. And it's like, I realized that comfort was not the right path to have a fulfilling life.
Oh, we're right there with you. I love it. And I love what you're giving others, which is that kind of transformation and power too in their life, which is such a gift. That's awesome, Ross. So
Thanks.
We should probably wrap up, but we have 3 questions we ask at the end of every podcast. So we'll just ask those to you now.
Okay.
The first one is, what book or books up to 3 would you recommend that everyone should read?
I think everyone should read The 4-Hour Workweek. It's a little bit, it's been out for a few years now, but I think it's a good foundation to kind of what's going on in the world and the shift in the type of jobs that are out there or that are possible. I read all business books. One that's not a business book is Shelter by Lloyd Kahn. It's published by Shelter Publications. Any of their books would be interesting if you're interested in different home types and kind of what's possible in that arena. I'm trying not to pick another business book because that's pretty much all I read.
Okay. That's totally fine.
One that is kind of aggressive, I don't know if it may be too aggressive, is the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. And that talks about what it really takes to create a business that stays in business and isn't just kind of like a flare up and then go out. If you really want to stay around, I listened to that guy's book on audio, so it's called the 10X Rule. I have it on audible.com, so I listen to it on my phone as like a motivational tape, and it's him reading his book.
Cool.
But anytime I'm feeling kind of slovenly or don't want to get up, I listen to that book. So yeah, 10X rule, shelter, and 4-hour work week.
Great,
Nice.
great trio.
Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Question 2. Imagine there's a listener or two kind of feeling stuck in their life. Maybe they have a mortgage, or maybe they're in an unhappy living situation. They feel, like that could change. Maybe they're working a corporate job. What would be one kind of first step they could take, one move away from that's the most accessible and one they could do fairly easily?
I would say, even in those situations, first of all, go ahead and get yourself steeped in the fear of where you're headed, and it's okay to feel bad about it. If that's a heart attack or the stress or dealing with your boss for another 20 years, go ahead and feel that fear and feel that reality of what's coming, and use it to motivate you. And then I would say, if you have a spark of inspiration, a lot of people, there's a spark, but it will die. The spark will go out of these moments of inspiration that we have. You've got to act immediately, even if it's writing someone a letter, sending someone an email, buying product launch formula. If you have that spark of inspiration, jump on it immediately, because that spark it's got a shelf life. It's going to go away. But if you take action on it, that action that you take and the result from that action, that's going to be your new spark. So it's almost like a staircase, and you've got that first step. You've got to step onto that first step of the staircase before the second one will appear. So when you get that spark of inspiration to step on that first step of the staircase, you've got to step on it right now, and don't wait. Like, stop what you're doing, send the email, whatever. And I would say also, don't fire your boss on the first day. Just get started in your after hours, and give yourself a chance to transition, because it is 1,000 tiny steps. So just take that tiny step. Don't try to be a hero on day one, but take those tiny steps when you get the inspiration to do so.
Love it. That's great advice. Great wisdom. The third question is, what are you most excited about right now?
Most excited about seeing the East Coast. I may have to go back to Iowa first for that build, but I'm excited to be in Florida. I'm 4 hours from Key West. And I saw some alligators the other day.
I saw some alligators the other day.
We did 2 crocodiles.
Oh, really?
Oh, crocodiles.
Cool. Those are the mean ones. Yeah, the crocodiles. But yeah, I guess just and my customer here, she asked me if I ever get tired of the van thing, and I said, well, not really when you're going down the highway, because everything's new and you're present. Like, you can't. Back in my old hometown, driving to work, driving to the grocery store, your brain will automate those tasks because it's so familiar, and you're not even present. But I'm constantly going down a new highway where there's new, like here they have the Florida Panthers. They're out in the woods. So there's panther crossing signs which says, watch out, a panther might run out of the woods here. So it's constantly like my reality is changing, the different flora and fauna and landscapes of the different places I go. That's always exhilarating, because you can't get bored with seeing new places and being able to go wherever you want. Pick the city that you're interested in or curious about, and you can go.
Yeah, you're reminding me of a lot of our travels. Like, just driving through Utah is just it's like wonderland for landscape changing. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
Well, we should let you go, Ross. Before we do so, why don't you just let people know where they can connect with you online, and anything coming up for you? Maybe when does your next product launch happen?
Well, I'm looking to, like I said, refilm my series probably this summer. But I should mention, I have a split. So if people sign up, they do get a chance to join the course after a couple of weeks. So I do, as you mentioned, the live versus the evergreen, they call it.
Cool.
I do a combination of that.
Cool.
So if people are interested in the course, they can go to cargovanconversioncourse.com, and that'll put them on the email list and notification list for that. And then my main site that is kind of my home base is alternativehomesteday.com.
Awesome. This has been so great talking to you, Ross, and it's great to hear, how you're living your life and how you're helping others. It's really, really awesome stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for reaching out.
All right, that's it for this week's Ownstream podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this awesome interview with Ross Lukeman. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode for links to everything mentioned, including Ross's website, his van conversion course, links to all the books he listed, and the other resources discussed. All of that can be found at ownstream.co/Ross Lukeman. That's ownstream.co/RossLukeman.
Also, please sign up for our weekly tip-off email at ownstream.co and just click the sign up button in the upper right-hand corner. This is where we share each Monday 3 cool things we've learned in the last week in the areas of lifestyle, business, and spirit. This could be an amazing quote, individual, tip, or tool designed to bring you more freedom and power in your life. So definitely sign up for that again at ownstream.co and just click sign up.
Finally, please leave us a review on iTunes. We really need your help in expanding our reach, helping us to inspire more people and spread the amazing ideas discussed on this episode with Ross Lukeman and others too. If it feels right to you, simply go to iTunes, search for the Ownstream podcast, click ratings and reviews, then click that 5th star and leave us a brief comment on how this episode or others has inspired you. Thank you so much for considering that. We are very grateful. Also, we're on Twitter and Facebook at Ownstream and on Instagram where we post regularly at own_stream. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Ownstream podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.